What really lies hidden in the Vatican's secret archives? Mystery and intrigue are inherent to the Holy See, the Vatican in Rome, of the Catholic Church. People will always wonder what religious authorities are conspiring to behind closed doors, what treasures lie within the vaults of the Vatican. Despite claims that the Pope has evidence of extraterrestrials and demons tucked away in his catacombs, the truth of the secret archives is much more realistic, and because of this, it is also much more interesting. From handwritten letters of historic personages such as Queen Mary's Queen of Scots and even Abraham Lincoln, to papal bulls excommunicating Martin Luther, the contents of the archives are enough to make any scholar's eyes go wide. Yet a high-level nature that makes the content so fascinating is also what makes them so closely guarded. For in truth, it's not evidence of aliens that the Vatican is hiding from the public eye, but rather documents that may show the Church was complicit in Mussolini's state-sponsored terror and possibly even in Hitler's anti-Semitic programs. Archivum Secretum. The truth behind the secret archive stems from a mistranslation of Latin. The actual name of the Vatican archives is Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum. Secretum in Latin does not mean secret, as some may suppose. It's more accurately translated to mean personal or private. The archives are in fact made up of private letters and historic records of past popes over the past 4 centuries. The archives were published by Pope Paul V. The Pope clearly had a sense of the historic importance of papal correspondence and knew that such documents should be preserved, but however, in the 17th century, was firmly of the mentality that common people should not be privy to words exchanged by kings and popes. So the archives were kept under lock and key. Accessing the private archives. It was not until 1881 that Pope Leo XIII allowed researchers to view some of the archive's contents. But it was no simple matter for one to view the documents, and the procedure has not changed much over the last 200 years. First of all, journalists, students, and amateur historians are not given access. Once an interested party has proven that he or she is a serious enough scholar, credentials are granted that must be renewed every 6 months. To enter the archives, a scholar enters through the Porta Santa Anna, past Swiss guards, walks through the Corti del Belvedere, and presents credentials. This is according to O'Loughlin, 2014. Once admitted, scholars must request which specific documents they wish to review. They are only allowed to request 3 per day. So instead of being able to browse the contents of the archive, they must select articles from catalogs in which items are handwritten in Italian or Latin. These catalogs are quite imposing considering that the archives contain 50 miles, that is 80 kilometers, of shelving and documents dating back to the 8th century. This is according to Kaiser of 2015. If in just a few minutes they realize that what they are seeking isn't in the requested folders, they're forced to pack up for the day, a challenge for scholars on a deadline or those who have traveled long distances. Again, this is according to O'Loughlin, 2014. Computers are allowed, but not photography, so scholars spend most of their sessions in reading rooms typing up notes. Historical gems in the archives are these. If a person is fortunate enough to gain access to the Vatican archives, he or she would be able to pursue such historical gems as these. The 197-foot long, that's 60 meters long scroll containing the minutes of the trials of the Knights Templar, which lasted for several years, starting in 1307. The Inter Caetera, the papal bull issued by Pope Alexander VI in 1493, that split the world between the Spanish and the Portuguese. A letter from Michelangelo to Pope Julius II. The 1521 papal bull of Pope Leo X excommunicating Martin Luther. The 1530 petition of Henry VIII sent to Pope Clement VII in order to request an annulment of the king's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, which includes the signatures and seals of over 80 English lords and clergymen. Of course, the Pope refused the annulment. A letter to Pope Sextus V from Mary, Queen of Scots, begging the Church to intervene shortly before her execution. Notes relating to the 1633 trial against Galileo. A letter from Pope Clement XII to the 7th Dalai Lama requesting protection for Franciscan missionaries in Tibet. Letters from both Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, both written in 1863, neither man Catholic, in efforts to have Pope Pius IX come down in favor of the Union or the Confederacy. Pope Pius XII in league with the Nazis. David Kurtzer, a historian from Brown University, was able to examine documents from the reign of Pope Pius XI, that was from 1922 to 1939. He concluded that the Pope, quote, made deals with Mussolini to protect the Church's interest in exchange for silence on state-sponsored anti-Semitism, a conclusion at odds with the Church's account, end quote. This is according to Olal in 2014. Groups are pressuring Pope Francis to make fully available the contents relating to Pope Pius XII, that's from 1939 to 1958, in order that the world may finally know for certain the man's involvement with the Nazis. Some say that he supported Hitler either in a manner similar to the Church's support of Mussolini, or perhaps even more substantially. Others say that the Pope worked against the Nazis and helped to hide Jews and other targets of Nazi aggression. People talk, scholars talk. Are there things that aren't being made available because they're seen as unflattering from a church point of view? Said Kurtzer. Still, Kurtzer admits that the secret archives are staffed by professionals and that there's an appreciation of serious historical scholarship. This again according to Olal in 2014. In 2012, in celebration of the 400th anniversary of the archives, 100 documents were made available for the public to see in an exhibit called Lux in Arcana. The Vatican opens its secret archives to dispel Dan Brown myths. After centuries of being kept under lock and key, the Vatican started opening its secret archives to outsiders in a bid to dispel the myths and mystique created by works of fiction such as Dan Brown's Angels and Demons. The archives, until now jealously guarded from prying eyes, provided one of the key settings in Brown's thriller, in which a Harvard symbologist, Robert Langdon, played in the 2009 film by Tom Hanks, raises against time to stop a secret religious order, the Illuminati, from destroying Vatican City. And in the movie, the secret archives are portrayed as a high-tech cross between the Pentagon and the lair of a James Bond baddie, complete with bulletproof glass and Swiss steel elevators. But in reality, the archives rely on disarmingly old-fashioned technology with a creaking metal lift connecting different floors and millions of documents cataloged in 1,300 parchment-bound inventories dating back centuries. They have been open to carefully vetted academic researchers for more than 100 years, but in the past few months the Vatican has granted tours to select groups of journalists and members of the public, allowing a glimpse into one of its innermost sanctums. The Daily Telegraph was invited on the most recent tour, along with about 25 enthusiasts from around the world who earned their places by buying a recently published lavished illustrating book on the archives. They're housed in fortress-like wings of the Vatican behind St. Peter's Basilica, with the avenue leading to the building watched over by a phalanx of Swiss guards in ceremonial uniform and officers from the city-state's own police force, the Gendarmerie. The 2-hour visit revealed more than 52 miles of shelving in an underground concrete walled bunker, as well as exquisite 16th century wooden cabinets packed with priceless parchment letters sent by princes, potentates, heretics, and heathens to the Holy See. They include correspondence between the Vatican and some of the most prominent figures in history, including Erasmus, Charlemagne, Michelangelo, Queen Elizabeth I, Mozart, Voltaire, and even Adolf Hitler. Most of the elaborate is a letter sent by English peers and bishops to Rome in 1530, demanding to know why Pope Clement VII was taking so long to annul the marriage of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. It bears 83 signatures, which below which dangle 81 official seals on red cords. The oldest document in the archive dates back to the 8th century, while others relate to the trials of the Knights Templar from 1308 to 1310, and the enrollment of the first contingent of the Swiss Guard in 1505. The archive's custodians are at pains to dispel the conspiracy theories and aura of intrigue fostered by Dan Brown's hugely popular page-turners. Quote, "The word secret is not quite right. It comes from the Latin secretum, which in fact translates to more accurately as private. The documents are the private archives of the popes, and we really don't have any secrets. This is what Marco Grilli insisted. He's the secretary to the prefecture of the archives. When pressed, though, he admitted that there is a section which really is secret and that remains off limits to historians and academics. It contains papers relating to the personal affairs of cardinals from archives custodians are at pains to dispel the conspiracy theories and aura of intrigue fostered by Dan Brown's hugely popular page-turners. Quote, "The word secret is not quite right. It comes from the Latin secretum, which in fact translates to more accurately as private. The documents are the private archives of the popes, and we really don't have any secrets. This is what Marco Grilli insisted. He's the secretary to the prefecture of the archives. When pressed, though, he admitted that there is a section which really is secret and that remains off limits to historians and academics. It contains papers relating to the personal affairs of cardinals from 1922 onwards, as well as centuries of annulment of marriages. Whether there are any bombshells lurking in these confidential files is a matter known only to the Vatican. Nor do scholars have access to any papal papers from after 1939, the beginning of the papacy of the controversial wartime pontiff Pius XII, who has been accused of turning a blind eye to the Nazis' extermination of the Jews. While the recent scandals over clerical sex abuse have only confirmed the Vatican's century-old bunker mentality, the secret archives seem to be forging a different approach. Quote, "We were amazed by the access we were given and the speed with which the whole project was completed," end quote, said Paul van den Heuvel of VDH Books, the Belgian firm which published the glossy volume of high-quality reproductions of 105 documents. Quote, "The Vatican is beginning to realize what an incredible asset it has." This is from the Telegraph that we read this as well.